What the? Good evening, and thank you all for coming. All right, so my name is Andrew Gates. I am the president of College Republicans at UCSB. That's right. I am the bigot responsible for this huge crowd, and thank you all for coming. So I'd like to start off by thanking the Young America's Foundation for sponsoring this event. Without their support through funding and organization of the event and promotion efforts, hosting this talk would not be possible. So again, a big round of applause for them. Cannot be stressed enough. I'd also like to thank all the members of the College Republicans, many of whom weren't even on the exec board, who helped organize this event today, spending countless many nights, putting up flyers, making signs. Just big hand for them too, please. So a little background for this. Last quarter, we decided to bring Ben Shapiro, no surprise to you all. We believe that it was both productive and well within our rights as tuition-paying students to host a speaker who offers a different perspective, especially given the fact that the average UCSB student is exposed daily to predominantly leftist views in the lecture hall and beyond. We thought that was fair. In October, we requested funding from Associated Students for Security, room and a portion of Mr. Ben Shapiro's honorarium. The Student Senate, recognizing the value of civil discourse and free expression and acknowledging their obligations per the AS Constitution, approved our funding request. So big hands to them, actually. Upon discovering that the Senate had approved our funding request, the UCSB Black Student Union decided to protest 3 Senate meetings, expressing why not only should our event be defunded, but why it should not be allowed to take place on campus, period. Our issue with those who came to protest the funding of the event is not that they disagreed with Mr. Ben Shapiro, but rather that they felt the need and the moral duty to shut down an event simply because they disagreed with it. They forget that we, College Republicans, and everybody who attended this event to hear Ben Shapiro speak, are also students of this university, and that universities were created with the aim of discovering truth, and that civil discourse and freedom of expression are indispensable norms that guide the project of truth-seeking. If either of these two things are jeopardized, if either of these two things are jeopardized, the project of truth-seeking itself is jeopardized. As students, we aren't paying thousands of dollars in tuition to shelter ourselves in safe spaces, which exist solely to protect our feelings and guard us from different opinions. We, the students, are paying thousands of dollars in tuition in order to participate in the enterprise of pursuing truth. And a necessary consequence of pursuing truth is that one encounters views that one disagrees with. We reject entirely the left's attempt to infantilize this campus by promoting such childish and pernicious ideas. Although Mr. Ben Shapiro holds controversial viewpoints, he is not a troll. That is, he is not merely a provocateur whose sole purpose is to be offensive for the sake of being offensive. So, like some people, not gonna name him. I don't know who this Milo guy is, but. We also cannot help but notice with a combination of humor and chagrin that since the announcement of this event, our club and its members, and even Mr. Shapiro himself, are being portrayed on social media as Nazis, KKK members, and white supremacists. Even a UCSB professor, whom you would expect to be above this, referred to Jewish conservatives Ben Shapiro and David Horowitz as neo-Nazis and neo-fascists during the school-sponsored Day of Democratic Education. Now, this might come as a surprise to you all, but Nazis would presumably not look too favorably upon the prospects of hosting a Jewish speaker like Ben Shapiro. And white supremacists And white supremacists presumably would not look too favorably upon our all-Latino executive board of the College Republicans. Contrary to what some leftists who accuse us of being fascists say, we, unlike them, deny the key tenet of fascism, namely that the political minority should be silenced if they seek to express a political opinion that is contrary to the prevailing orthodoxy. And that's why tonight, not only will Shapiro be given a platform, but all students will be given one as well. Any student is free to come up to these mics, or this mic right here actually, and express dissent during the allotted Q&A session at the end of Shapiro's speech. So if you think Ben Shapiro is immoral, if you think he's irrational, if you think he's misguided or wrong on every count, you will have the chance to express such sentiments in the Q&A portion, because we do not want to censor different opinions. All right, enough of my words, and now I'd like to share a bit of background about the man we fought so hard to bring here today. Ben Shapiro is an attorney, political commentator, and conservative activist whose career spans more than a decade. He is a graduate of UCLA and Harvard Law School, and the author of 7 books, the latest of which is the fictional thriller True Allegiance, published in 2016. His first book, Brainwashed: How Universities Indoctrinate America's Youth, was written and published when he was an undergraduate at UCLA. He is the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire and co-founder of the watchdog organization Truth Revolt, and he has dedicated his career to speaking up for basic conservative principles, even in the face of significant opposition. So in the spirit of free expression and civil discourse, a spirit which we should all, as academics and civilized and considerate human beings, embrace, we are proud to welcome Mr. Ben Shapiro.
Thanks a lot. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you all coming out here. As you can see, I came bearing gifts, which we'll discuss in just a moment. But I first want to thank, obviously, the College Republicans for having spent all of the time and energy organizing this, all of you for taking time out of your schedule, out of drinking and partying to come hear me. And come on, it's UCSB. And I want to thank, obviously, Young America's Foundation for sponsoring this event. So, I want to start with a story from Vanderbilt University. So November 2015, black students protested and demanded diversity classes at Vanderbilt University. And the next day, a bag of dog crap showed up at the front door of the Black Cultural Center. Right? It was a bad thing. It looks like maybe a racist incident. So the Black Student Union releases a statement calling the university as a whole racist and talking about the, quote, isolation of students of color. And the police investigate. And then they don't do anything. So it looks like a clear-cut case. There's institutional racism, clearly, right? They report this terrible racist incident. The police don't do anything after investigating. Except what happened, it turns out, is that there was a blind girl, and she had a dog, and the dog pooped, and so she picked up the poop in a bag. She couldn't find anyone to direct her to the nearest trash can, and so she did what you're supposed to do. She put it in front of the nearest populated building, figuring that somebody would get up in the morning, take the bag of dog crap, and throw it in the trash. So you'd figure that this would be a little bit embarrassing for the Black Student Union for making such a big hubbub over basically a blind girl putting a bag of dog crap here so somebody will clean it up. Well, they weren't that embarrassed. They actually released a statement that then said that the university was still racist, but also that people with disabilities were clearly marginalized on this campus. And that's the way it tends to go on America's college campuses these days. Everybody is a victim. Not everybody. If you're a white, straight male, you're not a victim. But everybody else is a victim. Intersectionality is the theory of the day, and this is the theory that says that we are going to judge your virtue, we're going to judge your capacity to be a good person by the color of your skin or by your sexual orientation, and precisely the opposite of the Martin Luther King idea. The idea now is that your identity is your virtue. So this creates a hierarchy of victimhood, and the hierarchy of victimhood goes something like this. There's LGBT people at the top, and then blacks, and then Hispanics, and then women, and then Asians, and then Jews are near the bottom here, and then straight white males are at the very bottom, because straight white males are the great victimizers. And we can tell whether what you say has value, not based on what you're actually saying, but based instead on your place in this hierarchy of victimhood. So if we could somehow find the unicorn of intersectionality, you know, the bisexual, transgender, female little person who's 3/4 black, 1/4 Native American and disabled, if we could find that person, we could all just go home, because that person would have every great view, because no matter what that person said, it would have to be right. You could not be more of a victim than this human being. And victimhood in our culture now confers privilege. Right? There is a victim privilege in our culture, at least in our political culture, that suggests that if you are part of a victimized group, this means that you have virtue to speak on any subject, and also you get to shut down everybody else. And there are some pretty solid privileges that come along with victimhood, two in particular. One is you're the only one who gets to talk. You get to tell everybody else to shut up. You get to tell other people that they are the beneficiaries of white privilege, or that they are the beneficiaries of America's social justice problem. You get to tell everybody else that you are the one who gets to speak. The floor is yours if you are higher on the scale of victimhood. And second, you actually get to hurt people. So it's not just enough to tell people to shut up. If they violate those rules that say they have to shut up, then you actually get to hurt people. And you also get to virtue signal. I mean, this is what we're all into on campuses these days, is virtue signaling, this idea that, again, you're a great person based on your identity. So I've heard that there are stickers being passed out on this campus and buttons being passed out on this campus in honor of me coming and speaking. And say, what, UCSB against hate, is that correct? Hate-free UCSB. Well, UCSB against hate was the one that I had heard before I came, so I have my own button. And it says right here, me against you sucking. Because it turns out that facts are not hate. It turns out that truth is not hate. And if you don't like what I have to say, then maybe you should argue with what I have to say instead of simply declaring it hate speech and therefore off limits. I also have heard that they've planned like half a dozen events tonight to prevent people from coming. Clearly that was successful. And I heard that one of the events that they planned tonight was the Social Justice Awards. Now, I don't know what trophies they hand out at the Social Justice Awards. I don't know what they hand out. Are they like little statuettes? So I brought my own, actually. It's just a design suggestion for the Social Justice Awards. And I think it's perfectly appropriate. As you can see, it's a golden toilet. And I think that this is a perfectly appropriate suggestion for two reasons. One, social justice is a bunch of crap. And second, I made perfectly certain that when I purchased this, that the toilet was sex non-specific. Anyone can use this toilet. It doesn't matter. You should just feel welcome to use this particular toilet. So, you know, personally, I'm just disappointed that I don't actually get to visit the Poetry Slam. You guys are having a Poetry Slam tonight. Nothing is more fun than a Poetry Slam, as we all know. I'm sure we got Keats and Shelley out there reading a verse about menstrual equality or some such nonsense. Well, when I talk about, you know, the violence that springs up from all of this, it's not just enough that it's fun to joke about the silliness of all of this, because it really is silly. I mean, we're going to be having questions, and let me say what I always say at my talks, which is, if you're on the left, I want you to go first. It's more interesting if we have an actual conversation, and all joking aside, I like having conversations with people who disagree with me, because sometimes we can actually reach some element of truth. I tend to think of politics sort of like two lines that are not parallel, and where they intersect, sometimes you can find some facts that you agree on, and so sometimes it's fun to go looking in search of those facts. But usually, or at least too often, the virtue signaling, the intersectionality philosophy, the snowflake philosophy suggests that things have to be shut down. And that's why you've had situations, I know, on this campus with a bomb threat at a past event. And I know that at UC Berkeley, there was obviously the riot surrounding Milo's speaking there. When I was at Cal State Los Angeles, there was a near riot there. I had to be rushed in by a cordon of 20 armed cops. I had to be rushed out by a cordon of 20 armed cops. All the students in this theater were basically trapped there. They were told to stay there until I left, until the crowd could dissipate, because they said they couldn't guarantee the safety of the students. When I was at Penn State, we had a serious security problem with people trying to bash in the doors while I was speaking and rush the room. Now, this sort of thing, unfortunately, is not rare enough. And that's not even taking into account campuses where the administration is completely unhelpful and actually wants to ban you, right? When I went to DePaul University, they actually banned me from DePaul University to the point where when I walked on campus, you can find the video online, it's actually kind of funny, because I'm standing there, and there's like an 8-foot Goliath security guy just standing over me, and he's saying, if you take one more step forward on this campus, we will take you away in handcuffs. And they'd actually brought the sheriff from Cook County there. He was sitting right there in the background, you know, gleefully smiling at me as he fingered his handcuffs. And he was ready to take me away in handcuffs. And this is all based on this idea that if your feelings are hurt, you get to shut down somebody else. And your feelings are inherently hurt if you're a member of one of these groups. At this university, perception of victimhood allows you to deface signs for this lecture. It allows faculty and staff to plan how to disrupt the lecture. As was mentioned, it allows professors to say things that are completely false, like I'm a neo-Nazi. Okay, you see this yarmulke? It means they ain't my people. Okay, in fact, according to the Anti-Defamation League, which is a lefty group, I was the #1 recipient of journalistic anti-Semitism in the United States last year. And a lot of that was from the alt-right groups and the neo-Nazi groups. But that doesn't stop that. And members of the Black Student Union here tried to block the event originally, which is sort of fascist. It is. And apparently they complained that my criticism of the Black Lives Matter movement was making black UCSB students feel unsafe, unable to focus in class because they're too busy protesting this event, which, I mean, I guess that's as good an excuse as any for getting a C on your diversity studies essay. But honest to goodness, you didn't have to do that much work. I mean, just do what everybody else does. Crib it from online, change a few words, and the professors will never find out. I mean, this idea that it's because I'm making you feel, if you're failing your class because I make you feel unsafe, for God's sake, look at me. Okay. One of these students said it makes people feel uncomfortable to the point they're not able to focus on their schoolwork because they're busy mobilizing to protect their basic rights. If you've been spending the last 6 months mobilizing to protect your basic rights from little old me, let me suggest that you need to spend your time more productively. Okay, so the actual theme of this speech is not about the evils of intersectionality. It's about the truth about America, which is that this is the greatest country on the face of the earth, and here, we're not trying to stop you. If you're black, we're not trying to stop you. If you're Latino, we're not trying to stop you. If you're gay, we're not trying to stop you. If you're transgender, we're not trying to stop you. No one cares about you. No one's interested in you. No one cares about your life. No one is trying to throw up obstacles in your way. That's not to suggest there aren't isolated racists and isolated sexists and isolated homophobes and bigots. Of course there are. Of course there are. But the idea that the institutional society as a whole is out to get you is just plain false. And not only is it false, it's counterproductive and destroys your chances at success. Because if you imbibe the spirit that says that you're inherently going to fail, that anybody who says something who disagrees with you is going to cause you to be unable to study, and then you get a C in your diversity studies course, and now you can't go to the law school you wanted to, that's your own damn fault. Okay, that philosophy is your own damn fault. You want to succeed in America? Work harder. That's all. So I want to start with the white privilege issue, because this is a big one that comes up on campus a lot lately, probably the biggest one. This idea that you are a victim inherently if you're not a white person, that the Constitution was built for white people, the Declaration of Independence was built for white people, Western civilization was built for white people, and therefore it inherently privileges white people above black people. This is stupid. It is stupid. It's tempting, but it's stupid. Okay, first of all, it is true, of course, American history is replete with racism, and some people are currently affected by racism in the past. You may not have inherited as much wealth if your parents lived under Jim Crow. Obviously, that's true. But we cannot fix that with more racism. Injustice does not solve injustice. Taking somebody else's property does not fix the problem that your grandfather's property was taken from you. We can't fix where we start in life, but we can fix where we're going. It turns out that if you don't want to be poor, permanently poor in the United States, all you have to do is 3 things. There's 3 things, according to the Brookings Institute. You can do all of these. They're very easy, right? Get married before you have babies, finish high school, get a job. That's it. According to Brookings, only 2% of Americans who follow these rules are in poverty. 75% of people who grew up in poverty and followed these rules are in the middle class. The easiest pathway from poverty is to take personal responsibility for your own actions and follow those 3 rules. Graduate high school, get a job, and don't put that thing there without that thing on it before you're married. And as far as the idea that poverty is racially based, it's just not true. It's decision-based in the main and almost wholly. Okay, 71% of poor families with children are unmarried. That's the single greatest predictor of intergenerational poverty is single motherhood. The poverty rate among non-married white families was 22% in 2008. The poverty rate among black married couples that same year was 7%. So what happened to the white privilege? I thought that the country inherently is biased in favor of white people. Wouldn't the white single mother be better off than the black married couple? Answer, of course not. That's ridiculous. And the other one that people talk about is, of course, crime. They say that crime is obviously, the criminal justice system is biased. That's why there are so many people of minority ethnicity and minority race in prison. It's not true. If you don't want to go to jail, there's a very, very easy solution for this, and it's don't be a criminal. Okay, the police are not going. I understand that people have a stake in feeling like the police are out to get them. The police are not out to get them. In fact, when your house is on fire, when somebody's breaking into it, you're going to be calling the firemen and the police. And you're not doing that because you think they're going to come there and arrest you. Felonies are under-prosecuted in the black community. There aren't enough witnesses. Murder is wildly under-prosecuted in the black community. Police are less likely to kill black people than white people in shooting scenarios. In 2015, cops shot 987 people. A huge majority of those were armed or threatening deadly force. Blacks represented 26% of those shot, which sounds high until you realize that nearly 50% of all murders in the United States are committed by black people. Police officers are 19 times more likely to be shot by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be shot and killed by the police. And as far as the stuff that they tell you in all your classes about the implicit bias test, right, you're in your diversity class, and they tell you can go online and see what a racist you are, right? We'll do this stupid little online test where they show a black face, and you're more likely to identify a bad word as being identified with a black face. Those tests are a load of crap. The people who actually designed them say they're non-statistically significant. There is no identifiable evidence that demonstrates that racism on an implicit bias test supposedly translates to racism in real life. In fact, the results aren't even duplicative. They're not even duplicable. Okay, if you take the test twice, you're going to get two different results, which demonstrates the test is stupid. It's a bad test. Okay, how about sexism, right? America's a deeply sexist country. Women are under the thumb of men. No. Sorry to break it to you ladies, you're not victims. Or, happily, you're not victims. Welcome to the freest, most prosperous country on the face of the earth for women in human history. Now, before you start shouting about abortion and how we want to control your bodies and how I'm interested in your... believe me, ladies, I am not interested in your body. My wife's super hot. Okay. It turns out the only body part of yours that I'm interested in is the part that contains a baby. That's the part I'm interested in. I'm not interested in your esophagus. I don't care about your kidneys. They're all yours. Enjoy. Okay, the part that I care about is the part that contains the baby, because that is not you, that is a baby. That is a different human. You don't get to kill different humans just because they are inside your body. Okay, as far as the wage gap, this is the big myth that you hear all the time. Women are paid 72 cents on the dollar. It's almost worthless debunking this because it's so easily debunked. My favorite instance of the debunking actually happened during this year's Super Bowl. I don't know how many of you saw the Audi commercial in this year's Super Bowl. So Audi ran this idiotic commercial. And the commercial was this little girl driving around in a go-kart. And there's this deep voiceover where her father presumably is saying something like, "How am I ever going to tell my daughter that she is going to be living in a Mad Max hellscape for women? How am I possibly going to tell my daughter she'll never earn as much as a man just because she has a vagina?" And then at the very end of the commercial, they get into an Audi, and presumably this fixes things somehow. It's like, she's still going to be victimized, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, but at least she once drove in an Audi. So people tweeted at Audi after this, and they said, well, Audi, you pay your female employees less than you pay your male employees. And Audi immediately tweeted back, well, actually, that's not true. We pay them exactly the same if you take into account the number of hours worked and the job descriptions of the people. Right. Right. Okay, Time magazine found that in 147 out of 100 of the 50 biggest cities in the United States, women actually make on average 8% more than men. If they are single and childless and they're out of college and they have the same job description and work the same number of hours, they make more than men. You know, on college campuses, this idea that women are victimized, as a general matter is silly. Okay, 55% of all college students are women. 58% of all graduate degrees go to women. This idea that women are marginalized in the electorate, 54% of the electorate in the last election cycle was female. So if the patriarchy is winning, I'm just wondering why it is that they are the minority. And as far as the rape culture statistics, this idea that 1 in 4 women on campus are raped, rape is, as I've said many times in many settings, rape is, in my mind, the gravest evil, maybe graver than murder. I believe that rapists should be castrated or killed. Okay, I think that rape should be treated as... Non-consensual sex is the greatest crime that you can commit against another human being. It's a crime not against their body only, but also against their soul and their value as a human being. That statistic is still a bunch of crap, okay? Not 1 in 4 women on campus are raped. If they were, your parents would be insane to send you here. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I cannot imagine going, you know what? My daughter really wants her degree in poli-sci, but there's a 1 in 4 chance she'll be raped if I send her to that institution. So let's calculate the values here. Poli-sci degree, raped. Okay, no one would do that because it's just silly. The real statistic, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, from 1995 to 2002, there were 6 rapes per 1,000 per year on college campuses, which is lower than it is in the general population, actually. Okay, 6 per 1,000 is not the same, you may notice. For all the stats majors in the room, all the math majors in the room, 6 per 1,000 is not the same as 250 per 1,000. You know where that 250 statistic came from, that 1 in 4 statistic? It came from an opt-in survey where they asked women, have you ever been sexually assaulted? But they included in the definition of sexual assault things that we're not fond of but aren't rape. Things like, did someone try to kiss you against your will? Did someone touch you without your permission? Okay, I'm shocked that it's 1 in 4. I'm shocked it's not 9 in 10. I mean, how many times has a girl been on a date and a guy's gone in for a kiss and the girl's turned her cheek? Okay, the survey covers that. Hey, how about if you're LGBT, the idea that you're a victim in American society if you're LGBT? Well, the fact is that gay couples earn significantly more than straight couples in the United States. Men in gay couples make slightly less than men in straight couples, but women in gay couples earn a lot more than women in gay couples. Same-sex couples with both partners in the labor force make $8,000 more per year than straight couples. They're also typically higher educated. 46% of people in same-sex couples have college degrees. Only 1/3 of people in straight couples have college degrees. How about the idea that if you're in the United States, you're impoverished because of injustice, inequality, and privilege, and all the rest of this? Income inequality is actually not a huge problem in the United States. Okay, nobody rich is making you poor. The stupidity of the income inequality argument is the idea that just because I make a lot of money, I'm stealing it from you. I don't care about you. I've never taken anything from you. I will never take anything from you. In order for you to give me something, I'm going to have to give you a service in return. As I've said before, capitalism is about consent. Socialism is about non-consent. Capitalism is consensual sex and socialism is rape. Socialism is you get to take my crap. You get to take my stuff because you feel entitled to it. As far as this idea the middle class in the United States is disappearing, we're all going to die, it's awful, it's awful, it's awful. Okay, the upper middle class grew from 12% of Americans in 1979 to 30% in 2014. When people say the disappearing middle class, what they really mean is the middle class became the upper middle class. That's what actually happened. Okay, and income mobility in the United States, it's not dying, it's not dead, it's exactly the same as European countries with far more redistribution. Income mobility declines only when you drop out of high school or have a baby out of wedlock. So back to our original argument about poverty. Here's Pew Research on the levels of poverty in the United States, right? This grand conspiracy of poverty in the United States. 9 in 10 Americans had a standard of living that was above the global middle income standard. It means that 9 in 10 Americans are rich by global standards. 7% of people in the US were middle income, 3% low income, 2% poor. So 2% of people in the entire country, a country of 320 million people, 2% of those people are living in what anything would resemble global poverty. Here's the problem with all this stuff. When you say that America's out to get this group or that because you're a member of this group or that group, you get to shut other people down, you get to tell them to shut up, you get to act violent, you're dividing Americans and you're destroying the country. You're destroying the social fabric. If we don't have social fabric, we can't have conversations. You can't ask questions. I can't give you answers. Right? We can't talk with each other. We can't vote together. We cannot have a civil society without the social fabric that assumes that we play by the same rules. And when you make the case, not only do we not play by the same rules, but the rules should only apply to you and not to me, right? I should be able to do whatever I want because I'm a member of a victim group. You destroy that social fabric. And talk about discrimination doesn't make the social fabric better, not when the discrimination is phantom. It doesn't make the social fabric better. Example, in 2010, 13% of Americans worried about race relations. After 6 long years of talk about how race relations were down the toilet and Black Lives Matter and cops are shooting people and the lie of hands up, don't shoot and the rest of it, 35% of Americans were worried about race relations just 6 years later. Did that fix things? Did that awareness make things better? Not at all. In 2007, the wage gap between blacks and whites was 24%. In 2015, the wage gap between blacks and whites was 27%. So all that awareness didn't do a damn thing. Because it turns out that awareness isn't the problem. It turns out that in many cases, behavior is the problem. And if we have to change the laws, we'll change the laws, but stop pretending that this is about some shadowy conspiracy out to get you, because it isn't. In fact, according to Northwestern University study, perception of discrimination led to lower grades, less academic motivation, less persistence when encountering an academic challenge. You want to know why you couldn't study for your class? It wasn't because of me. It's because your teachers keep telling you no matter how you study, no matter what grades you get, you are bound to fail in American society. That's doing you a hell of a lot more damage than me standing up here telling you you can do it. You can control your own destiny. So here's the bottom line. Your life is in your hands. You can do whatever you want. This is America. No one cares. Do what you want. fly, let your freak flag fly. No one cares. Do whatever it is that you want to do. No one is out there to stop you. And I'll tell you what, if someone is out there to stop you, and you can show me evidence, and you can show any of us evidence, that that person is out there to stop you for any discriminatory reason at all, we will all stand with you. We will. We all want to be on the same side of this thing. What tears us apart is when you immediately assume, when people immediately assume that just because my skin color is different than yours, or my religion is different than yours, I must have an agenda that is adversarial to yours, and I want to destroy you. I don't. What I want is a country where we can all be free, where you don't have to care what I think and I don't have to care what you think, because we're all leaving each other alone, and all we care about is the maintenance of that freedom that was guaranteed to us by those evil white founding fathers who constructed the greatest system in the history of humankind. Thanks so much. Happy to take your questions.
All right, everybody, we only have one mic for Q&A, so if you want to line up for this line to ask Ben Shapiro a question, and you're on that side, you're going to have to go through the exit and just go in the main lobby and then come around.
And if you're on the left, then I would prefer that people get first priority if they're on the left, because it's more fun.
Left politically?
Yes. No, I don't care where you are geographically.
Okay.
This time, just to remind everyone, is for Q&A. This is not an opportunity for political theater, and so if you're not asking a question, we're going to cut you off. Just let you guys know.
Unless you're going to do like Ibsen or something. Like if you're going to do like a full play, then I'm up for that, but okay.
Hello, Ben, thank you for coming.
How's it going?
I'm well, thanks. So I wrote my question down. The classic American line describing the parameters of the Constitution goes, "The right to swing my fist ends where your nose begins." Excluding real and present threats or danger, my question is, where does the fist of freedom of expression end and the nose of well-being of the individual or society begin? For example, in France and Germany, the nose has been defined by everything Nazi being illegal. Where do you think the American boundary should be? Should people have the right to be open Nazis, express their Nazism, and try to spread and recruit for a Nazi cause?
Okay, so as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of Nazis. Okay, that's my statement. I'm also a bigger fan, right, no, understood. I'm a bigger fan of the First Amendment. So my feeling is that in open debate, Nazis lose, which is why the Nazi Party is not a real thing here. So I actually oppose a lot of the hate speech laws because I think that once you give the government the power to decide which views are acceptable and which views are not acceptable, then that gun can turn on you in a real hurry, and that scares me a lot more than the idea of a couple of kooks walking around with silly-looking Hitler mustaches.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Ben. Thank you.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Is it okay if I ask like a couple, one or two questions?
If they're brief, sure. I mean, they're big lines.
So my biggest disagreement with you is that when you talk about institutional racism, I know you pointed out that there are individual instances of racism.
Yes.
But I definitely do believe that there is institutional racism. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at what the FBI released in 2006, where they said that white supremacists were invading the police departments, or when James Comey essentially said that there is a history of minorities being targeted by the police, and he says our history with minorities is not pretty. And then you also look at Supreme Court rulings where they say that certain governments, state governments in the United States are literally with surgical precision trying to limit the African American and minority vote. It begs the question, like, how can you say there's no institutional racism when these institutions themselves are confessing that we're doing these things? And yes, they're being checked at times, but these things are happening. So
okay, there are a couple separate questions there because there are specific data points that you're mentioning there. You know, the 2006 FBI report, and then you're mentioning also the Supreme Court decisions on the Voting Rights Act and the rewriting of the Voting Rights Act. So as far as the Voting Rights Act goes, there is not a lot of evidence to suggest that black votes are being undercounted in southern states. It's just the evidence is very scanty there. Justice Scalia's, I think he wrote dissent in that case. Actually, it would have been the majority opinion in that case because they struck down the VRA. Is pretty telling and has a lot of countervailing data on that, so it's worth reading. As far as the idea of institutional racism, so here's my general view about institutional racism. When I say that there are individuals inside, I'm not saying individuals don't exist inside departments. I'm sure that there are some cops who are racist. The question is how do we fight, how do we fight racism? When we say institutional racism, the problem is there's no way for me to fight that with you because it's too vague. Yeah. So if you say a particular institution is racist and then demonstrate to me the evidence that the institution is racist, not that it's badly policed, not that it's incompetent, because there are police departments that are incompetent, but that there's actual motivated racism there, then we can do something about it and I'll stand right alongside you. But my problem is that when people say institutional racism, it seems to me a broad rubric under which they can subsume all complaints about American society or the cops. So you'll have situations where a black guy gets shot by the cops, and the first reaction is not, was the cop incompetent? It was the cop had to be racist because there's a white cop and a black guy. Right? And so what you've seen is the DOJ in some cases, like for example, Seattle Police Department, they'll say that there's institutional bias there, but then they'll provide no actual evidence of institutional bias. They'll just say a disproportionate number of black people were imprisoned or arrested by the police department. Well, is it possible that a disproportionate number of black people were criminals in Seattle? Sure. I mean, that's actually what they found in 1994. They thought that there was institutional racism at the Highway Patrol in New Jersey. There's a federal case about it. And what they ended up finding, they did a study that they then tried to quash, and what the study found is that they were actually under-profiling black people, that there were just more black people speeding in New Jersey. So the point that I guess I'm making here is that I like when, it's great that you're coming up and citing individual instances of data, and I want to look at each of those instances of data. I don't want to say that there's broad institutional racism in the United States, because you have to name to me the exact institution, and you have to name to me how it's spread throughout that institution, and it isn't just individuals within that institution, and then we can change it. Okay, so that's an institution that has racism. That's not the same thing as arguing there's institutional racism in the United States as a general rule, because that suggests that America is generally racist, which is something with which I disagree.
So, yeah, I might agree with you that there are certain instances of America where it's not generally racist. But then in those cases where when we do discuss that racism in that institution, it's hard as a black person because you're then told that you cannot discuss this because you're calling out people. Like when you start talking about white supremacists in these organizations, not to say that all cops are white supremacists, but they are there. Like there are some that were invading, like you said.
Right, and if you find the cop who's a white supremacist, again, I'm willing to stand by you. The problem is when you make blanket statements like there are cops who are white supremacists. I'm willing to say there are, but the percentage matters here. I mean, are we talking about 70%, or are we talking about like one guy? Right, so and that I think is the big debate here. And so that's why whenever I have these conversations, I try to narrow it down to what's the most specific thing we can talk about that we can solve together. Because I promise you, I will go out there with you and protest against a racist shooting. Like when Walter Scott was shot in South Carolina, I'm on your side, right? I'm on the side of the person who was shot because that was a terrible shoot. Everybody saw that was a terrible shoot. But when people say that what happened in Ferguson, Missouri with Michael Brown, when they say that it was hands up, don't shoot, that's white racism, there's no evidence of that whatsoever, and that was actually an attempt to get a cop on the basis of really bad evidence. So I think that it's incumbent on us to actually show our work. Instead of just saying institutional racism, let's go out and protest, let's find the specific instance and then we can solve it. Then we can solve the problem together.
Last question.
Yeah, sure.
So essentially, yeah, because just to add on to that, like, so I do agree, but then oftentimes when we start protesting, when we start doing all these things, there is this general fear that there is this conversation where it's already looked at as and we're delegitimized because they say, okay, African Americans are just going crazy, black people are just going crazy, and all these things. And it's hard to have dialogue and conversation.
I mean, if that happens, that's wrong. Yeah. I think that it depends on the nature of the protest. So my problem with the Black Lives Matter movement, as a general matter, to take an example, is that when you say things like Black Lives Matter, the implication is not the one that like other lives don't matter so much as it is the suggestion that there are a bunch of people, a broad swath of people in America who don't care about black lives. That's the implication, and I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think that we all care about black lives, and I think that if the question were, what should we do about this particular shooting, that's one thing, but if the idea is that cops are shooting black people because black people are black people, I don't see any statistical evidence of a trend of that. So that's the problem with BLM. BLM tries to draw a trend from an anecdote. You want to protest the anecdote, I'll protest the anecdote with you. You want to protest the trend, you first have to identify to me statistically the trend exists.
Okay. So,
great, well, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I appreciate it.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just finish off with this. So yeah, so I agree with, okay, so on the Black Lives Matter trend, yes, we do need to look at cases individually, and yes, we do need to, because sometimes there is this effect where you want to call racist immediately racism, and I agree with you, that's wrong. But I'm just saying that I feel like sometimes it becomes counterproductive when constantly when people are trying to defend these things and people are trying to fight these things, and automatically the conversation is shaped in such a way that we're these far out-right extremists or then we're far out-left extremists trying to...
Right, and I think that the biggest problem when it comes to language, and I'll finish with this, I'm sorry, but yeah. I think that the biggest problem there is, as you notice, I keep trying to peg down as exactly as we can the instances that we're talking about and the language that we're referring to. And I think that movements have a hard time pegging that down. And you see that from movements all over the country. But when you make a claim as broad as American society doesn't care about the lives of black people, Black Lives Matter, a lot of people are going to get pissed at that, and I think they have a right to be pissed at that.
Okay. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Hi, Ben. I wouldn't characterize myself as a member of the left, but I do have a couple of pointed questions. Mr. Shapiro, while I disagree with many of your conclusions, I admire your dedication to and insistence on the primacy of facts in public discourse. You've said and recently retweeted that, quote, you become a member of the left when you say that truth is not a value. Would you characterize President Trump as a leftist?
I would characterize President Trump's approach to truth as leftist, yes.
Okay.
Yes, his approach to truth is leftist, because I think that, I mean, as many of you know, I'm not a Donald Trump sycophant. So I think that I try to call it balls and strikes with him. He does some things that are good, some things that are bad. I think his approach to truth is scanty, shall we say. And so, yeah, I think that he thinks truth is relative. And my biggest problem with Trump is this. I like when he bashes the media because the media don't tell the truth. But if you're going to do that, you have to replace the not truth with truth. You can't replace the not truth with more not truth.
Do you think this problem is contained to Donald Trump or has spread to the Republican Party at large?
I mean, it's a real concern for me. I wonder that there are a lot of people who defend things that Trump says that are not actually true, as true just because Trump said them. And I think that there's a lot of team sport in politics right now that's very reactionary and and a big problem. I think that if people see politics as, he's my guy, therefore anything he does is okay, and this existed for Obama for sure, and I think it also exists for President Trump, I think it exists for most political leaders, it is your obligation as a citizen to determine for yourself what is true and what is false. You do not follow the leader. Okay? Be a human being, be a citizen, and be an adult. You're not a child. You don't need a politician to lead you by the hand. Check your own facts, decide what's true, and then call it like you see it.
Yeah, I just have one more short question. Along similar lines, how do you picture the future of facts in political discourse, given the trends toward dishonest definitions of terms like racism and wealth inequality on the left, and the rise of alternative facts and outright lies that, to your credit, you've called out frequently on the right?
Okay, so I think that my hope is that there will be enough young people who actually care about truth, that the reaction to what is a post-truth society, a post-fact society, this was a post-fact election. You had Hillary Clinton, who's a pathological liar on one side, and Donald Trump, who's a congenital liar on the other. So, and I said this during the campaign openly, which did not make me popular with some folks on my own side. I think that there will be a reaction where people demand the truth from their leaders, or we can just hunker down in our various bubbles, and people on the right will believe what people on the right want to believe, and people on the left will believe what people on the left want to believe, and we'll never be able to talk with each other. Because it's one thing for us to agree on a set of facts and then disagree about the conclusions to draw from those facts. It's a lot more dangerous when we can't even agree what the facts are. And right now, there's not even basic agreements on what the facts are, and a lot of purposeful vagueness from our politicians doesn't help the problem. And opportunism in political discourse doesn't help the problem. Just a quick example, and then we'll move. And that is, to take an example, Donald Trump over the weekend on Friday night, he said that his exact wording was something like, there was something terrible happened in Sweden last night. Sweden has been inundated with immigrants, and that's really done terrible things for crime. It's not an exact quote, obviously. It's a paraphrase. So with the left centered on something terrible happened in Sweden last night, and they said he was talking about a terrorist attack, and he's a liar. And the right centered, and then the left went one step, okay, so he shouldn't have made a reference like that because it wasn't clear what he was referring to. That's true. Then the left went one step further, and they said there's no problem in Sweden. And then the right went, whoa, wait, hold on a second. There is a problem in Sweden, and he's totally right about the second half of that statement. So instead of people holding these two thoughts simultaneously in their mind, that Trump shouldn't have said something happened in Sweden last night, and also there's problems in Sweden, the right goes, there's problems in Sweden, and the left goes, there was no terrorist attack in Sweden, nothing's happening in Sweden. And this is how you end up with the two sides screaming at each other like banshees and nothing actually getting done.
Thank you.
Hey, I just want to thank you for coming here. And I have a question that more relates to the second half of your discussions regarding capitalism and I guess like the current, this current status of upwards mobility present in America. Do you think capitalism as a system, first off to state, I think America is a mixed economy.
It is a mixed economy.
And I think you would agree with that. In generally, do you think the rise of automation is going to change the way conservative values approach the possibilities of moving upwards into society? And does that then necessitate possibilities like a universal basic income? And if not that, then what other solutions?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I think it's becoming of increasing concern given the level of automation that's happening in the society. The vast majority of manufacturing jobs in the United States, contra Trump, have not been lost to Mexico and China, they've been lost to automation. Right? 85% of all those jobs have been lost to machines. So people are worried that machines will take over the world. So my particular perspective on this is that we have always worried that machines are going to take over the world. The Luddites were smashing the gears during the Industrial Revolution because they were afraid that the machines were going to take over the world and they were all going to lose their jobs. Okay, we never could, like there are certain things that we never would have imagined as jobs that are now full sectors of the economy. Like 40 years ago, if you wanted a cup of coffee, you went to a diner and got a cup of coffee for 5 cents. And now you have an entire massive industry dedicated to specializing in making you precisely your type of coffee. So until they make the replicator from Star Trek, that's the machine that makes other machines and magically makes all items they don't have a price and and they're all free. Once that happens, then universal basic income probably isn't even necessary. I mean, if you can actually just create everything with machines and everything is extraordinarily cheap, the price of everything drops near zero, and you don't need much income to live on. So there's that. I don't think we're there in the economy yet. I also don't think we're there in the economy to the point where all jobs have disappeared. The job trends have kept up with the technological trends. It's not like everybody is now out of work because the technology has gotten so good.
Right, and that may be true, but like let's just take the short term for example. Like the rising possibility of automation in driving, for example, which is really soon.
So put Uber out of business.
And that would put approximately like 40%, because 40% of America is currently employed in the transportation industries.
Right.
That would cause, like at the very least, a very large displacement in terms of jobs.
For sure.
Would a solution that then to be like a possibility of universal basic income? And if not, then like what?
So I have two problems with universal basic income. My first problem with universal basic income is that automatically my view is that it causes inflation. If you just give people a bunch of money and tell them to spend it, then prices are going to rise accordingly, because everybody's just going to adjust for the fact that everybody has more money to spend. It's helicopter cash. You drop helicopter cash all over the world, and the prices are automatically going to rise.
Well, the prices, the money would still be backed up by like physical goods, though, because robots are still the one producing those physical goods. So it's not like there's a
right. And so then, but now you're getting back to my first point, which is that if robots are producing everything, then we're all cool, and who cares? They'll just keep producing everything forever, and we're happy.
So then, I guess in your case, then
so once the robots make everything free, then yes, I'm for universal basic income because everything's free. But until we have utopia and the robots make everything for free, there will be scarcity in the market. And as long as there's scarcity in the market, there needs to be a pricing system for that scarcity, because otherwise you're not going to produce more of that. You're going to produce less of it. So that's the basic economic point.
And there's also like the general point, which is that a larger point to this automation, which is that a lack of jobs would lead to a lack of purpose. And then
yes, no, it's totally true. But and so what I think is the question is whether there's a job lag, meaning people lose their jobs to Uber and then they just never work again, or is a job lag where they just find another job, but it takes a little while for them to adjust. And I think that the history of economics shows that we have not yet reached the point where jobs just disappear wholesale. Right? If once we reach that point, then we can start talking about other solutions that we have not considered yet, because then we actually are not living in a capitalist economy. And a capitalist economy is driven by the idea that there is scarcity of capital and labor and resource, right?
Society.
If there's no scarcity, then we're talking about utopia. So I pray to God that future comes true and we have utopia and everything's free. That'll be wonderful. Until then, people are going to have jobs.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Ben, thanks a lot for coming. That was refreshing. The lefty stole my question. Go figure that one, so I will ask a different question. If you'd be so kind to indulge me, I'd like to ask you, who or what is God to you?
Who or what is God to me?
Yes, and what role, if any, does that play?
God's my man. I mean, it's... the creator of the universe, the master of heaven and earth. Who is God to me? God is, as an Orthodox Jew, I believe that God provided us a moral foundation in the Bible, and that moral foundation is, if you live by that moral foundation, you will live a happier, better life, freer of sin. I think that God provides the idea of an objective moral standard that immediately begins to crumble as soon as you get to a subjective idea that everybody can create their own morality. So that's I think, the role of God in society. As far as what is God to me personally, all I can say is that I don't believe in God. I know in God. I don't just have faith in God. I have trust in God. And so that may not end up well for me, because it doesn't always end up well for people with faith. But I think that not recognizing God's providence over the universe, for me particularly, would be an act of tremendous ingratitude.
Amen. And I don't know as much about this topic as I maybe should to ask this question. I'm kind of cribbing from Sam Harris here, but if the Sanhedrin were to be reconvened,